Welcome everyone who's joining us. I'm keeping an eye on the waiting room, so I'll be adding people as we go, but it is 6 o'clock, so I think we should go ahead and get started. All right, welcome. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Yes, so I want to quickly introduce myself. Like I said, we're gonna get started right away. So my name is Mia. I am a member of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group, and I'm a resident in Ward 3 near Lee Park. And I want to thank you all for joining us. I especially want to thank Bill Blonigan, our Robbinsdale mayoral candidate, for speaking with us today. The intention of this meeting is to allow for a space to talk about racial justice and equity issues as they pertain to our elected officials ahead of our primary election coming up on August 11th. Several members of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group have come up with a series of questions, and I have presented these questions to the candidate a couple of days ago. We are here to listen and become better informed voters, and for those of us who are white members of the community, we are here to be better allies to our neighbors who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So with that said, we'll allow space for follow-up questions from the audience at the end. White people will defer and listen to BIPOC members when they have something to say. So this meeting is recorded, and you should be able to see a recording icon on your screen. Bill's also recording on his end as well. And you'll notice that microphones are off for the first part of our meeting, and then you'll be invited to ask follow-up questions via the chat later on. But I will open your microphone if you prefer. So the meeting structure will be as follows. In a moment, Bill will have 5 minutes for an introduction and opening statements. I will spend 30 minutes asking the questions that we voted on. And then we'll take questions from you in the chat or over the microphone for about 15 minutes at the end. And then finally, Bill will have 2 minutes for any closing statements where we will then wrap up the meeting. Okay, so Bill, thank you so much for being here. Would you please introduce yourself for us?
So yes, I am Bill Blonigan, otherwise known as William. I live in Ward 1. I've been a member of the Robbinsdale City Council since 1981 in January, and I've represented Ward 1, and I have some various reasons why I'm running for mayor at this point in time after 40 years of just having my one vote as a council member.
Excellent. Now, for our meeting, as for those of you who are just joining us, I see one more person waiting here. So throughout the first part of the meeting, we are going to be asking those series of questions that this group has submitted and organized in advance. So for transparency's sake, as I said, these questions were presented to Mr. Blonigan a few days ago. And by the way, any other candidate that's also meeting in this group and other Zoom calls, these same questions will be asked in the same order. I will refrain from asking any follow-up questions at this time. But Bill, if you see any activity in the chat box that you want to address in real time, please feel free. And for any of the answers that exceed, we'll say like 2 to 3 minutes, we agreed, right? That I will simply say 15 seconds and ask you to summarize and wrap up so we can get to as many questions as possible today. Okay?
Yes.
All right, so let's jump in with our first question. So what are some of the racial inequities that you identify in Robbinsdale? And what are the, I'm sorry.
You want me to give an opening statement or not?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, please do. Give us your opening statement and then we'll jump into questions. Sorry about that.
So I'll try to make the opening statement not 5 minutes. I'm so glad that this group has come up. I'm so glad that you organized. You can't believe the amount of input that you will have with council members and future council members. Anytime there's like 6 people saying something, we listen and we get worried that we're not representing the public. We probably get afraid of our jobs too. So your core values align with my core values. I found out when I was a little boy in catechism that my teacher was correct, that she told me that everybody should be treated equally. Everybody has equal dignity, and there's nobody that's any better than anybody else. Later, I found out that despite the fact that Catholics were 25% of the country, there had never been a Catholic president, and John F. Kennedy ran for office. He was young, he was charismatic, it had an effect on me. Later, I found out that for the first 100 years, there was a rule that was a de facto rule that you couldn't have a Catholic as a member of the United States Supreme Court. Eventually, there became to be more fairness, and there got to be a de facto Jewish seat and a de facto Catholic seat on the United States Supreme Court. And then it got to a point with George Bush and the second George Bush and even the first, and with Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, that actually there were a majority of 6 out of the 9 justices at one point were Catholics. Some were super conservative, some were super liberal. And it made me think that why can't it always be like this with every kind of a group, that there's representation, there's ups and there's downs, but people no longer judge you based on the color of your skin, your race, your sexual preference, or anything like that. It helped me that when I went through law school and high school, I worked as a carpenter and found out what it meant to sweat and work hard, and that everybody's work has equal dignity. But as I studied the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, went to college, majored in political science, studied in law school, especially the 1st, 4th, 5th, 6th, 13th, 14th, 19th, and that's the voting rights for women, and the 24th Amendment, poll tax, which is in the paper today. There's a fake poll tax now in Florida. I, again, thought, why is it can't always be like this? And for people of color, especially, it's really difficult because we've eliminated much of the anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish, anti-Italian biases, but you always carry around this color of your skin, and people can watch that. And I am the candidate, and I hope to convince people of that has always had this as a core value. I am going to take the 5 minutes. I have always had this as a core value. Last year, in an unprecedented thing for people on the city council, I got tired of waiting for environmental action by our city, and I wrote my own staff report. I wrote my own council resolution, and it passed unanimously because I think the rest of the council was too embarrassed not to go forward with the environmental, which has racial implications also, with the environmental things that I wanted to do. Next Tuesday, we will have another staff report that I wrote, and I brought up racially restrictive covenants last year, and now we're going to finally vote on it because nobody else wants to talk about it, and that will probably pass unanimously too because of the murder of George Floyd. I wrote my own my own response to another group calling this a murder and responding directly. And I thought my response was better than the city response that the other people voted for. I voted for it too. And so I just want to tell you that these are my core values. They've always been my core values since I was a DFL person that participated in caucuses way back in 1972.
Thank you. All right, so I was eager to get to all of our questions. I apologize for jumping right in before your opening statement, but thank you for that. So yes, let's jump right in. So our first question for you, what are some of the racial inequities that you identify in Robbinsdale? And what are the metrics that you would use to measure our progress in those areas?
So for all of these sketchy, for all of these questions, I've sketched out some answers. So excuse me if I look down. I did suggest that you cut me off 15 seconds. That's a good technique. So racial inequities in Robbinsdale are the same as Minnesota, the same as the rest of the nation. The income percentage, housing ownership percentage, the discrimination that prevents African American and other people of color from passing down generational wealth through the biggest asset, their house. Robbinsdale in particular, we do not have as diverse a set of employees working for the city as our population indicates that we should. As far as the metrics that you're asking about, we need to collect data. We haven't collected enough data. We should be above average in our metrics. And then when I say that, above average in the way we treat people equally. We're not going to get to a place where people of color are as well represented as they are in the NFL, but we should strive to be above average. We should strive to have people know us as a city that's welcoming for all. We should strive to be a city that doesn't have a reputation that if you're driving on Highway 81 from North Minneapolis to Brooklyn Park or Brooklyn Center, you probably shouldn't be a black person because you have a higher chance of being arrested or stopped. And I don't really know that that's true, but that's why we need data in our police arrests and our police encounters to find out about these things. So I guess that's sort of the answer to that question.
Great, thank you. What strategies will you use to increase racial equity in Robbinsdale if you're elected mayor?
Well, a lot of the literature that some of our people have been reading and has been pointed out to me lately. I've always been a voracious leader, but I haven't read enough about this kind of stuff. There was a seminar that was led by Mr. Harrington, Department of Public Safety Chief, and Keith Ellison, Attorney General, last year in July probably of 2019. And they set forth a lot of things that we could do in order to deal with things like this. And without going into the details of that, because it would take so long and it'll come up later, I think what we need to do is the type of thing that my motion or my indication last year that we should study racially restrictive covenants, when I just brought that up on September 17th last year. You can look at the 31.5 minute mark of the meeting, and I bring it up, and it was crickets. The rest of the council wasn't there. I don't think they understood what I understood at the time in my novice understanding of all of these issues. But nevertheless, that part I did understand, is that you have to educate, especially to white people, you have to educate about the history of racism, and you have to actually prove it to them. And that's where racially restrictive covenants are just so obvious. And even a conservative white person is like, yeah, that wasn't good, that you couldn't live in a certain neighborhood if you were black, you couldn't buy a house. And then you have to become anti-racist. You have to bring up anti-racist policies. I'm getting through this book by Ibram Kendi, and I can't go into everything he says, but in summary, he sort of says, you're either racist or you're anti-racist, and you have to do anti-racist things. You have to constantly examine yourself. I have to examine my prejudices, and then you have to tirelessly advocate, which I need to get better at, but I do have a start, and I think better than the other candidates. Last year, September 17th, I said, let's do this. Earlier than that, I wrote another memo about, as I am repeating, I guess, about the environment, about admitting that humans are hurting the environment and making it worse, and it's going to have disastrous consequences, which, I didn't put this in the memo, but which disproportionately affect people of color, Caucasian-led societies being in the middle and warmer, not warmer, the middle and more moderate latitudes, and Black people being in southern latitudes, which will have way worse effects from climate change.
Good, thank you. Now you started to answer my next question a little bit with the book that you showed us, but have you done any other personal work or learning on topics of racism? And if so, of what nature?
Well, so going to law school, people make fun of lawyers and they're mad at lawyers a lot, but majoring in political science, studying political science, learning about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Jim Crow laws, etc., and going to law school for 3 years, studying the underpinnings of our Constitution, the way it evolves, the fact that women didn't get the right to vote until 1920, the fact that even now a woman has never been president or vice president, despite being about 52% of the populace. I don't want people to underestimate how much study and time majoring in political science and being a lawyer is. I don't want you to underestimate how I'm proud that I've been on the city council for 40 years. Somebody with experience can deal with the staff and not be snowballed, overrun as much as somebody that doesn't have experience. So I'm proud of that kind of thing. As I said, is this question 2? No, is this 3? As I said, I've also studied through Mr. Harrington and through Keith Ellison, who I know, what they recommend in this panel that they had, and it's very detailed. And Julie Ralston Aoki, Julie Ralston Aoki is a wonderful resource here in Robbinsdale. She's a super expert. She's written articles. She's pointed me to articles that I should be reading. So that's the kind of thing I've been doing.
Excellent, thank you. Now let's talk about the Robbinsdale Police Department. So how would you hold the RPD accountable if there were inappropriate or harmful actions?
Well, they have done inappropriate things during my tenure. There's something called the Post Board that controls what police officers do. That's both good and bad as far as if you want accountability and better relations and better results with the races. There's the arbitration provision in our union contracts, which you've read about in the paper, is split the difference often, and the officers don't get the punishment or whatever that they should get. So you've got to look at the union rules and all of that kind of stuff. And I think body cameras have made them more accountable. Police officers relate to me that they like body cameras because often they are accused of doing bad things, and we don't see those. And the body camera shows up that, yeah, they were appropriate in that case. The advent of everybody having a movie camera on their cell phone, however, has brought to light the atrocious behavior of an unacceptable percentage of police officers, the brutality. As a sometime defense attorney, I know that police officers on occasion lie. I don't know if it's any more than the rest of us. We've got to hold them accountable with more data, more standards, and by being vigilant and more so people can see what's going on. in order to get accountability.
Great, thank you. Now, what policy changes have you contributed to in support of racial justice and equity?
I don't think there were any female officers on the police force when I first got on the city council. I tirelessly advocated in the early days for us to have female and for sure more female police officers. That has happened. So that's a success story. I have advocated in some ways tirelessly, and in some ways I'm really getting tired of it, for us to have more diverse police force, more diverse police officers. We've only occasionally had African-American people. We have a Native American on the police force right now, at least partially Native American, but we don't have enough. At the planning sessions for our goals and objectives for at least the last 2 years, but periodically in the past, I've said we need more diversity on the police force. This last time in January or February of 2020, I went so far as to say, hey, do you guys agree with this? And even the police chief agreed with this. When we have, due to the difficulty in getting any police officers now, much less ones with diversity, do you guys have any objection to if we get a CSO that is a person of color, offering that person a job if they pass their test, pass their classes, pass their post-board and the psychological? And Dan Rogan went along with it, and the chief went along with it, and I think we have that policy now. But we never brought it to a vote. I've since discovered also through the Golden Valley City Attorney that you can have an affirmative action program, but you need to have a study. Minneapolis and St. Paul can afford this study. We can't. We'd have to go together with a bunch of other cities to have a affirmative action program. And then there's other things that I've done, but that kind of answers that question. And I might throw something else in later.
Great, thank you. So my next question, what would be your first action as mayor to ensure Robbinsdale is starting down the path of working towards racial equity among our residents, businesses, and schools?
Well, I've sort of already done the first step, which is forcing this vote next Tuesday by, it's really unprecedented that a council member would have to draft his own staff report and his own resolution, like I did for the environment. And this is just as important as the environment. I go back to that September 17th meeting and watch it, and it's crickets. So I'm taking it upon myself to at least have a victory with this start of educating people and trying to turn their opinions by having the vote on the racially restrictive covenants next Tuesday. Now, as far as what would be the first thing I would do, excuse the expression, but you know, there's not a silver bullet that is this one thing you can do right now to eliminate the 400 years, the years since the Civil War, the years since Jim Crow came in. You can't just have a one thing that you do. I just think that we need to do something on all of these metrics. I do have this, you know, this panel, this study that John Harrington and Attorney General Ellison came down with. It has so many different pillars of how do you got to engage the community. You have to have prevention and training. You have to have investigations and accountability. Policy and legal implications have to be considered. Officers have to have wellness, have to have training. They have to be mentally healthy. We have to have them help with all of that. Each of these little things that I've talked about has many different subparts. And then one of the bottom lines is, don't just talk about it, allocate some money to all of these things. The police budget is over 50% of our city budget. That doesn't count the water, sewer, and all those enterprise funds and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's a huge portion of our budget. Somewhere in there, there is money to reimagine policing and have money that is just as well spent as part of the public safety budget to do things that lessen the amount of conflict, help protect and serve in the same way that a guy with a gun would help protect and serve. So those are the kind of things that I would look to if I'm elected mayor.
Great, thank you. I just want to address to anyone who has joined us recently, again, welcome. You probably recognize a lot of the questions that we're asking. We're asking them in order of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group as we voted. So we're just going through these questions. I hope that you are ready to take notes, and we have time for follow-up questions in, let's say maybe 15, 20 minutes or so. Okay, so we'll keep going. No, you're doing great. You're doing great. Thank you. So my next question, how would you use the Robbinsdale Human Rights Commission as a resource?
Well, piggybacking on my last answer, follow the money. I've talked to former HRC commissioners who say, you know what, I kind of think the staff just tolerates us. And I have to admit that the city council is the one that tells the staff what's important. So unless three of us are pushing to have the HRC have more import, then it's not going to happen. So I'm at fault too for not pushing hard enough, and so is the staff. But they need to have more of a free hand to, if we're using them as advisors, we need to get their opinions. So they need to have more of a free hand in telling us what they want to look at and in trying to describe after study what policies they recommend or what changes they recommend. And I think if once we make it known that we've allocated the resources and we consider their opinion important, and it leads to differing results and input into a city policy, I think we'll fill up the Human Rights Commission, which we've had a hard time filling up lately because of that perceived attitude, I believe.
Okay, great. Now we've touched on the RPD a little bit already. You mentioned a bit about the budget. The next question, what changes do you envision for the Robbinsdale Police Department?
So again, I would, so far this is my Bible, but I can be looking at other research, other people around the nation. This is local. This was done before George Floyd was murdered. And by the way, I was the first council member that used those terms. I couldn't use that term as a juror, but no, I'm a political person. I can use that term. So this talked about this study, the weakness of this study as far as our future action is that this was largely focused on traumatic things that police officers did to other people and what the recommendations are. But again, this is the kind of a thing that we can use to set our priorities. We can use as examples of how we can make a better relationship between the community and the police, how the actions that they take can be more healthy. So those are the kind of the changes that I envision. I envision more training, well, and that's in here too, but I envision more training for the police and getting to their core values, because I kind of don't blame them sometimes for thinking, my God, everybody's against us. I'm a good cop. I don't have those violent tendencies. I'm treating people with respect. And like every other person, they don't realize that they have implicit bias in their own history and in society that just treats whiteness, Caucasian, Northern European or Middle European as the norm, and somebody else's culture who's just as American as any of us, somebody else's culture as other. So I think a large part, other than what's in this study of what we need to do, is get to the place where the racially restrictive covenants go. At least you can study what the problem is and try to get somebody else's viewpoint in mind, and then slowly over time you're going to be moved and be more equal in the way you treat people. Also, again, we need to do something affirmatively to attract people of color so that the police force reflects what the people of the community are.
Now, next question, do you have contacts or community partnerships in Robbinsdale or in other local communities that you would use as resources to advance racial equity?
Well, I mentioned earlier that Julie Ralston Aoki is a very fortunate contact for all of us citizens of Robbinsdale to have. She's an author. She works in this area. She works in public health. I know Keith Ellison, Mike Freiberg. I would say that of all the candidates, I for sure have the closest relationship to Mike Freiberg and NRES, although some of the other people on the council have a close relationship with them too. And then other contacts. Well, I'm supporting Sheila Webb and working with her, but that's a new contact and a new relationship. In regard to having contacts, we can't do what we have done, which is, and I'm partially at fault for this, which is say to the community, we would like to talk to people with diverse backgrounds and diverse opinions. Come down and do it the way my culture does it. You read these things in the paper and you come down and you participate in forums with these rules about who speaks when and all of that kind of stuff. We have to actually go to where the people are that we want to empower more. And we have not done enough of that. And why is it that we have such a close relationship with the city councils of Golden Valley, New Hope, and Crystal, and we're never reaching out to the people of North Minneapolis? So if I was the mayor, I would go to where I can meet people on their own type of a situation or their own place where they are. And I think if I say, hey guys, you're from North Minneapolis, come and talk with me here in Robbinsdale, that's just not as good a way to do it as to go find people of different opinions, backgrounds, and cultures where they are. We can also do this within Robbinsdale. There are plenty of places in Robbinsdale where there are diverse populations, where I should be going and trying to seek out opinions on their terms and on at their house and home.
Great. Now here's a pretty broad question for you, Mr. Blonigan, but what is your #1 priority or goal as mayor?
So what prompted me to run for mayor is that we are not doing enough with the environment. We are not being open and transparent enough and accommodating and welcoming to all people. And, you know, now go to the last Economic Development Authority meeting. I'm the president. Last Tuesday, we had a meeting. At the end, under general comments, I said, somebody's told me that it's really a pain in the rear to watch the council meeting and then have to flip off the WebEx council meeting and then log into another WebEx meeting in order to watch the work sessions. I was trying to be more open and transparent. Just go watch that and see all the reasons that we have for not trying to be more accommodating and more transparent for that kind of a thing. And this is what I've been dealing with. And so even if I win or I lose, please vote for me. If I win or I lose, you can't believe, like I started out with, how powerful you are when you all speak, when you all tell the council, when you all tell the city staff. No, this is the kind of transparency we want. So what are the other priorities I have? The other priorities are on my literature. Blonigan for mayor, you can probably see my literature. If not, I will post it, but the environment, inclusive, transparent government for all. I'm proud of my record in being the longest serving, and I think one of the leaders, especially for redoing the downtown and having it be a downtown that we can all be proud of as a human scale, authentic downtown. We do have great city services. We have great staff. Those are all my priorities, but the reason I decided to run, the environment and inclusive, transparent government for all, those are the two things that annoyed me and prompted me to run after 40 years. Why would I wait 40 years? That prompted me to run. That was my core value, as I talked about in the beginning here.
Thank you. Now, when should the City of Robbinsdale take the lead on social issues, and when should the city wait for action at the state or federal levels?
Well, in general, you might say that cities should stay in their own lane. There's certain things that state and federal government can do better. But being the only member of the Robbinsdale City Council that's ever gone to a National League of Cities convention, where I meet diverse people and find out diverse ideas that cities of all sizes, types, and natures come up with, I believe what they promote at the National League of Cities, which is that now cities are the laboratories of democracy in the United States. We don't have a filibuster. We don't have gridlock. We don't have as much money as the federal government, but also the federal government is tied to lobbyists and big spending and everything. We not so much. So we should advocate social justice policies through both statements, like I did in 2012 when I said we should have a registry for domestic partners, through statements and through actions. We are a B city, and I would like to be an A or an A- city on the environment, and I could go on and on about why environmental responsibility leads to social justice and justice between the races. But we shouldn't make a statement about everything that's a social policy, but the important ones we should. And again, we, the cities, are leading these things. Thanks.
Great, thank you. What's your vision for ensuring all Robbinsdale residents feel safe and free of harmful prejudices?
Again, there's no magic bullet on that. We have to progress on all fronts. And again, becoming anti-racist is a hard thing to do. You have to constantly evaluate your own prejudices. And I've always felt that I had prejudices. I don't know if it was ever since 12th grade social studies or somewhere in college. And I'm always noticing things that I have prejudice in, and I try to study and figure out why I'm like that and how I can change. So we have to just always look for those things on all fronts that we can advance to be anti-racist. And it's a very hard job. It requires direct speaking. It requires a person that's not afraid to say, this is racist. And here is one thing that I did lately. Our liquor store closed, our liquor store reopened, only credit cards accepted. I went down to the liquor store. I stood in line because I thought oh my gosh, not taking cash, that could be socioeconomically and racist policy. I stood in line. I talked to Black people that said, I don't have a credit card. I can't go here. I'm going to go to Crystal, lose money for the city, but also a racist thing. And nobody, when I bring this up, no other person, staff or city council will talk about that. They want to avoid that. I will put my finger in the wound and I will talk about these things. And I even used my credit card to charge for one guy because he only had cash, and it took me about 10 minutes for him to buy a thing that was $3.80. I sort of thought, well, that's not going to work on a large scale, but that's the kind of thing you have to do. You can't be afraid to talk about these things. And your silence, when people bring this up, your silence is helping racism. Because when you say, please be patient, like the city council, everyone else on the city council and the staff thought that that was okay to put in a letter that was going out to apologize for the George Floyd murder. When you say, please be patient, that's just not good at all. And you'll see on that video that I said, even though my letter was better and posted earlier somewhere else, that was one thing I couldn't take. Please be patient. And that's something that I think I can do better than others, because I'm so old now, I can't have time to be patient.
Thank you. All right, so if you're elected, we've talked a little bit about budgeting city funds, but if you're elected, will you find it important to allocate city funds toward racial equity programs?
Well, in the interest of getting more questions, I think I sort of answered that already. Where do you've got to look at a place where at least 50% of the budget is. So that's a place that we can still be safe, but yes, the answer to that is yes.
Okay, let's move on to a new question here. Do you feel that the city parks and recreation serve all residents living in Robbinsdale?
Well, yes and no. We have a high percentage of our facilities directed toward sports for boys. And there's a good thing and a bad thing about that. These volunteer people that run the Little League, that run, I coached basketball in our league, they are doing our job as a park and rec department for free. It is amazing what they do. And so I'm not taking anything away from that whatsoever. However, most people actually don't do those things. And most people aren't in Little League. I'm not in Little League anymore. I loved it when I was, but we have to have something for all ages and all people. We have to sort of reimagine what we do and be open to different things. Somebody at some time, a group, was willing to, in Sahaki Park, construct a free golf thing for us for people with frisbee golf. And I got voted down on that. I lost. So that's the kind of thing that we have to be open to. Another thing that you could talk about as far as racial relations and social justice is the fact that we have closed basketball courts, and in particular, full court basketball courts outside. There's an understandable component to that, in that there was rowdy behavior and loud neighborhood disturbance. And then there's another component to that, is that this has racial implications here, because a large percentage of the basketball players were African Americans. So is it because they're loud? Is it because they have a different culture than us? Is it because they're African Americans that we're closing this down? So it's not an easy answer to that problem, but we have to work harder on it and try to come up with innovative solutions to the things that are disturbing, rightfully so, and the things that are not, because it's really just a racial profiling situation in a way.
Great, thank you. Now, I'm keeping an eye on the time. We're at about 6:45. I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So Mr. Blonigan, we had 3 more questions, which I will just put on pause right now. I want to give the group a chance to ask any follow-up questions. If I may, I'd like to start with Jackie's question in the chat. If you can see, if everyone can open up the chat and take a look, feel free to type your follow-up questions there. Otherwise, you know, wave at the camera after this one and I'll open your microphone too. So Jackie asks, Mr. Blonigan, you have mentioned Golden Valley during other question topics. Would you support implementing an equity task force in Robbinsdale, similar to what exists in Golden Valley?
Probably. I would have to look at it more. I have the ability to look at it better than most because the Golden Valley City Attorney is my daughter, Maria Cisneros. And she, having been raised by her mother and I, is a champion of equity, having children that aren't a pure Caucasian. They're just regular human beings with different DNA than her and I. She is a bulldog on this. And there's so many things, not only implementing an equity task force in Robbinsdale, similar to Golden Valley. They are ahead of us, having studied some of these things that we're just now getting to for a year or two. So yeah, I probably would do that. I would want to study it a little bit more, but I'm like a 98% sure I would support something like that.
Great. I don't see any other questions in the chat yet, but Jan, may I unmute you? Thank you for waving.
You had mentioned something about a bunch of people coming up with reasons why they couldn't make the meetings, the work sessions after a regular council meeting or something of that sort, more accessible to the public. Can you give us some kind of idea of what kind of reasoning they're working from?
Well, you know, the video of the EDA meeting that I asked that question at kind of speaks for itself. But the general tenor of it is technical difficulty. Well, to me, it's our job to overcome that. And in 1969, we landed men on the moon. Come on, we can overcome that. But you, and then there's the one council member who said, well, let's worry about that next year. Let's put it in next year's budget. Or look at it, not even put it in next year's budget, look at it for next year's budget. I'm more impatient than that. I want to get things done now. And I've been such a nice guy and trying to not irritate people for so long that I'm sort of done with that in some ways. I do want to be accommodating and nice, but I'm at certain places where the public, like Jan, says, hey, let's look at some action. Yeah, I want to go forward, but let the video speak for itself. Go look at that. And you can go to the city website and get any of our meetings, any of our city council or EDA meetings on video.
And which one was that?
Well, it was last Tuesday, so it would be the 14th. Just look
Gotcha.
look at the very end, and you just can see with the environment and with racially restrictive covenants, this is the same similar problem that I've had. Like, please, it's please be patient. And I will post, if I haven't done so already, my experts, I will post on my Blonigan for Mayor website copies of my response to the community that was clamoring for some statement about the murder of Mr. Floyd, and the city's one that was okay, but I didn't write that one. And I'll show my cross out where I got everybody to say, please be patient. So to answer your question, Jan, it was like, please be patient at this EDA meeting. And I don't want to be patient. I want to cause things to be stirred up a little bit more, especially when you, the public, are demanding these things.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. All right, I'm trying to keep an eye on everyone's camera. Oh, I see a question in the chat from Aaron. Aaron, wave at me if you want me to open your microphone, otherwise I'll ask here. Aaron asks, as mayor, will you take steps to recognize and find ways to celebrate Juneteenth?
Well, I've thought about that with regard to gay pride until you asked this, Aaron. I've thought little about it, although I have thought about it. The way I've thought about to recognize gay pride is, again, Golden Valley is way ahead of us. They have this Pride Festival every year, and they had to cancel it this year because of COVID. I think we in Robbinsdale should go to Golden Valley and buy a booth and become a part of their already superior, great Pride Festival. I think, now that you brought this up, that we could do that with Juneteenth. We find somewhere in this adjacent community where they have the best Juneteenth activities and festival. And I think we should go meet the people that are running the festival, the people that are going to the festival, the regular people just like us, and be a part of that festival. I do not have any objection to taking steps to recognize and find ways to celebrate Juneteenth on our own. And that's a good idea, and I would do that as mayor. Why wouldn't you? I mean, whatever, how could you not do that? And yeah, June 19th, how can you be declared not a slave and then keep being a slave until somebody tells you about it? That's, the whole thing is disgusting, the slavery thing. And it's a basis of our whole country, which is not a proud thing.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to try and go in order here. I see Chris, and then we'll go to Anne's question in the chat after that. And then Sarah, I see your hand as well. So Chris, Chris Berg and Annie, may I unmute?
Perfect. Hello, Mr. Blonigan. I think that we all can agree that there is an economic component to racial inequality. What role do you think municipal government has in trying to break down some of those barriers to equality on an economic, from an economic standpoint?
Well, there are things, I'm looking through my notes here, but there are things that we do as government that are now modern day analogies to redlining, to racially restrictive covenants. We have to examine our zoning, for example, and determine how justified are our zoning laws. Do they contribute to economic disparity? R1 districts, residential 1, residential 2, there can be duplexes. Can you have, I'm not saying I would vote for this, but can you have a mother-in-law's garage house on the back to help people that have low incomes? The other thing we have in our Robbinsdale laws is our safe housing laws that throw people out of their houses in the event that they run afoul of certain types of laws. Is it important to try to throw people out when they're shooting guns in the neighborhood? Probably. Is it important when you try to throw people out for violating drug laws? Well, maybe, but maybe that's not, you know, if it's a minor thing, maybe that's not as important. St. Louis Park is working on, and or they have already repealed some of those types of laws. So we have to look at what they've done and what some other communities are doing. Those are just two, like the two major examples I can think of off the top of my head where we can move toward your concern.
Great, thank you. I'd like to point out Anne's question in the chat. Anne says, you mentioned two things about RPD, hopefully a quick question. What is the post board that you mentioned? And why has it been difficult to recruit BIPOC police officers?
Police, I think it's police officer standards and training, and they control what you, as a police officer, are required to do. Years ago, we had a police officer do something illegal, and you've got 30 days under the law as the police officer to say that you've run afoul of this, and then they, no, that's a long enough answer on that. Why has it been difficult to recruit BIPOC police officers? That is partially because it's difficult now to recruit any police officers because it's not as glamorous, it's not as well thought of by the public in general, and it's dangerous. Okay, so now in addition, if you're BIPOC, this is what the police chief has told me, and I believe it actually. Why do you want to be in Robbinsdale when you're going to be the only Black officer? We've had African-American officers. Why would you not want to be in Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, St. Paul, or Minneapolis, where you at least have some compatriots that you can talk about with after work and say, oh my God, you can't believe what these other officers are doing to me. Also, in general, since we have a police force of 27 sworn officers, there's not as much ability to advance your career, go up to sergeant and all of that kind of stuff. So those are some of the problems.
Great, thank you. Sarah, I wonder if I can unmute you. I saw your hand earlier. I also see your question here. May I unmute you, Sarah? Let's see if this.
Oh, this is her husband, Adam, actually.
Oh, hi, Adam.
Can you hear me? Hey, yeah.
Yes.
No, I just dropped it in chat too, but I was just asking, hi, Bill, or Mr. Blonigan. What are your ideas to bring more minority-owned businesses to Robbinsdale, and do you have any examples of what you've done previously as a council member?
You know, I probably don't have good examples other than to say there are minority-owned businesses in Robbinsdale, which on a, in downtown Robbinsdale, every building and business, well, every building, let's go that way, every building except for the drugstores and the funeral parlor has been aided by the Robbinsdale HRA, which I was the president of, or the EDA, which I'm the president of, in some way. And what we do is we provide tax increment financing. We provide matching grants when you make improvements to the outside. That doesn't, however, answer your question, Adam, in that it doesn't bring minority-owned businesses to Robbinsdale. It helps minority-owned businesses that want to come in and are already here. You know, we have Stephen at Lions Gym. We have the El Toro, but thinking of something to bring minority businesses in, I guess we just have to be more welcoming. And we we have to seek people out where they are and try to recruit them to Robbinsdale. We have recruited other businesses to Robbinsdale because we know them. It's in my social group or my acquaintances as a social group. So I guess we have to answer your question, go out and seek people where they are.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Adam, for the question. All right, so we just have a couple of minutes left. We've spent about 15 minutes as promised on follow-up questions. So we will bring our meeting to a close and ask Mr. Blonigan for a brief closing statement. And would you also tell us the best way to find you online and the best way to continue these conversations outside of our meeting?
So the best way to is to go to bloniganformayor.com. And you can use the number 4 or spell it out FOR, but 4, the number is the official one. We are on Facebook at Elect Blonigan, and you have contact information there. You have contact information in 3 different ways on my literature, which I will put online if I haven't already done that. And so, so the other thing is the 2 minutes. I just think that I am the most experienced, the most trained, unfortunately tied for the most white and tied for the most male. But I have a record, and it is my core, and it's not something that I just started responding to because the public brought this up. You can go back September 17th of last year and see that I brought up a way to start getting an entree into people for them to be educated and to understand the effects of racism and thereby to go on and improve things. You can go back to earlier in 2019 when I wrote my own memo about the environment, and that again is you can read about it. That's 20% more African Americans support environmental responsibility than Caucasians in general, and they have the effects in their neighborhoods. And what is worse, they're both tied for being the worst. I mean, is it worse to have an environment where all human life and all animal life is threatened with extinction? Or is it worse to condemn a person after 400 years in the Americas? Is it worse to condemn a person to just live out their life as a lesser human because of our discrimination? So I have a record. I have the training. I'm not ashamed of being a lawyer. I can do things and figure out things that other people can't. Look on my literature on the back. I have innovative things that only I have done. And I ask you to vote for me for mayor in the primary, which is August 11th, but you can vote now. Go to the City Hall during regular business hours, request an absentee ballot, write questions to me. I don't have any problem of talking to anybody about any of these things because that's what I signed up for. That's your right. You are the bosses. And again, keep on what you're doing because you just can't believe how much of an impact you can have if you all get together and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing us. So thank you for coming to this. I can't believe you'd spend a Friday night listening to me. What a deal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and to echo Mr. Blonigan, thanks everyone for being here on this beautiful Friday evening. And thank you again, Mr. Blonigan, for your time with us today. So I don't think this group will have any problems getting registered to vote, but if you haven't yet, please do. Vote early by mail. Make sure your vote is postmarked by August 11th. And if you vote in person on the 11th, be sure to wear your mask and practice social distancing too. So thanks everyone.
Next time you see me, Mia, in secret, you can call me Bill. So
Bill, thank you.
Can go away.
All right, thank you, Bill. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone. Have a nice evening. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.